video, we'll be discussing 3 different theories of emotions. So imagine that you're swimming at this beach, swimming, relaxing, when all of a sudden you see the unmistakable dorsal fin of a shark. So what happens next? Well, it depends on who you ask. So both James and Lang independently theorized that after encountering the stimulus, you would have an emotional expression. That is your visceral somatic response. So upon seeing this shark, your sympathetic nervous system would be activated, priming you for a fight or flight response. Your heart would start beating faster, you would probably swim like you've never swam before, and now all of these expressions would then cause you to have what's known as an emotional experience, such as fear. So for James and Lang, expression happens first, followed by experience. But if you were to ask Ken and Bard, the emotional experience would happen first. Then you would have a bodily visceral expression. So the feeling of fear precedes any expression of it. First you would feel afraid, then you would start shaking in your boots. So if you argue that the feeling of sadness precedes any expression of it, such as crying, you would be following Ken and Bard's theory. But if instead you say crying happens first, then you feel the emotion, you'd be following James Lang's theory. So think about an emotional experience you've had. Which of these theories seems to map onto your own experience? Me personally, I feel that James Lang sounds strange and contradictory to my own experiences, but there is some support for it. Botox, which uses the neurotoxin from the bacteria Clostridium botulinum. This toxin can be life-threatening as it prevents the muscles from releasing acetylcholine, thereby preventing neurons from communication, and thus asphyxiation usually occurs. Now, this bacterium can be found in canned food that has been compromised, so be careful with dented cans, and especially cans that are bulging. But back to Botox. The injections prevent muscles from moving, and when used for cosmetic reasons, the injections in the face prevent facial muscles from moving, with the end goal of being, if you can't move your face, you don't have wrinkles. At any rate, in one study of women who had these injections, they reported that they were unable to frown, unable to smile, and they reported feeling fewer emotions and with less intensity. And all of this supports James Lang, since if you can't express your emotions, you don't have the subsequent emotional experiences. In another study, participants were given this mouthpiece that forced the corners of their lips either up or down to make a smile or a frown, and these participants reported increased feelings of happiness and sadness respectively, again supporting James Lang. Yet there are some concerns with this theory. Taking sadness as an example, there are many ways to express sadness, not just by crying, but frowning, being hunched over, walking more slowly, looking down. But these expressions also overlap with other emotions. I can also be crying because I'm overjoyed at some happy news. So does that mean Ken and Bard is right? Well, not so fast. I can feel sad without expressing my sadness, right? People can hide their emotions. Do experiences always lead to expression? Now note that both James Lang and Ken and Bard have identified 2 components of emotions and deemed them to be independent of each other, and claim that one happens first, causing the other. So here again, we have this one-directional causal arrow. And what about the stimulus we first encountered that set off this chain reaction? Not everyone who encounters the shark fin in the water would have the same response. So what if I'm a shark researcher or maybe a photographer for National Geographic? I don't think I'd have the same fear response. So my appraisal of the situation seems to matter, and this is neglected in both of these theories. So let's take a look at the cognitive theory. And the cognitive theory says that the identity of emotion is based on our cognitive assessment or appraisal of the situation. And to illustrate this, we're going to be taking a look at a famous experiment conducted in 1962 by Schachter Singer. The participants were given injections of adrenaline, yes, adrenaline, but they were all deceived and told it was vitamins. Now, adrenaline is going to raise your heart rate, increase your alertness, and just overall increase your arousal. Now, only half of the participants were told to expect these effects, from the vitamin injection, of course. The other half weren't told about these expectations. Then the participants were placed in one of two conditions. The euphoric condition entailed a confederate, that is, a researcher posing as a participant, walking into the waiting room and acting euphorically, jumping up and down, acting excited. In the second condition, the anger condition, the confederate walked in acting upset, frustrated, angry, punching the walls, etc. So let's take a look at the results. In the euphoric condition, those who were not expecting arousal reported feeling a higher level of activity, while those who were expecting arousal reported a lower level of activity. Now, this difference suggests that if you know it's coming, so you are expecting it, you can curb the experience. It was not surprising and completely foreseen. But in the anger condition, a large difference between these groups emerges. So the informed subjects rated their anger level as 0, no anger at all. After all, they were expecting arousal, not anger, so they weren't experiencing anger at all. But these uninformed subjects, despite getting injections of adrenaline, which does not affect anger, they felt more angry. So if their expectation didn't impact their emotional experience, there would be no differences between the two informed conditions. If their appraisal of what's going on in the room, feeling more euphoric or more angry after being in a room with someone acting this way, these conditions wouldn't differ from each other. After all, the adrenaline should be increasing everyone's arousal, but it doesn't. So the uninformed group in the anger condition, they're assessing their situation as one in which they're angry. How do we explain this? Well, cognitive appraisal matters. It's not simply the neurobiology alone. So let's take a look at another study. This is the swaying bridge study. So imagine walking across a rickety bridge across a raging river below you. If you're crossing this, I'm sure your arousal levels are pretty high, so you're very aware of your surroundings and you're probably tense as you're walking across this bridge. Now, as you're crossing the bridge, imagine being approached by a female researcher and you're asked to fill out a survey. She gives you her number and asks you to call her back the next day. Half of the men were approached this way. The other half were approached by the same female researcher and asked the same thing 10 minutes after they had crossed the bridge. How did the context, that is, when they were approached, affect their response to calling this female researcher back? Was this heightened arousal attributed to the female researcher instead of being on this swinging bridge crossing a river? The results would suggest so. More males called the researcher back if they were approached on the bridge. If their arousal was solely to do with the attraction to the researcher, then there wouldn't be differences between the two groups. Clearly, situations matter. So studies like Schachter and Singer and the swaying bridge indicate the importance of cognitive assessment. If cognition didn't matter, we would not see a difference in the two groups, between the informed and uninformed, and either on the bridge or off the bridge. Now, neither of these studies confirm nor disprove any theory, so these studies don't isolate experience from expression or from cognition to determine which causes what. Now, things like Botox and forced smiles or frowns provide support for James Lange, or the notion that emotional expression precedes emotional experience. However, the distinction between expression and experience once again separates mind from body, as if we have bodies, not that we are our bodies. Are expression and experience separate? Do I not experience my own body? Is my experience based on sizing up my visceral response, or is my bodily expression a response to my emotional state? What if this distinction is artificial? What if our bodily expressions are not surrogates for our emotional experiences, nor are they the precipitating factors causing us to feel a certain way? Our bodily expressions are our emotions. We are our bodies. So my clenched fist is anger. My smile is happiness. My tears are sadness. I don't put my hand in a fist because I feel anger, as Cannon Bard would state. Nor do I feel anger because my hand is in a fist, as James Lang would state. What all of these illustrate is how expression, experience, and cognitive assessment all contribute to emotion, and it's not simply a matter of which comes first or what causes what. So whether James Lang and Cannon-Bard are right, they are after a singular causal chain. And for what? What would be the goal of identifying the cause and effect here for emotion? Does this explain emotion? Is this the appropriate pursuit for psychology? The cognitive theory points to the importance of how we have taken up, perceived a situation, sized it up in light of our concerns and understandings. Here too, we have the body implicitly there in the two major theories of emotions, only tacitly understood. What if instead we asked, what is it like to be depressed? What is it like to be angry, happy, or sad?